I think that one of the ways that I have dealt with trauma, and specifically homophobia, from growing up has been art. I think that, in a world that has told me that I don't belong, that I shouldn't exist, the way that I have resisted, the way that I have shown up is by being creative, by actually making life through art.
Hi, my name is Peter Knett, and I am here with Vivek Shraya, the creator and star of the new series, How to Fail as a Pop Star.
An Indian singer is never gonna get signed in this country unless you fucking listen to me!
So you've called this show an anti-success story. What made you want to tell an anti-success story with this project?
I think one of the things I find hard about our culture, especially with social media, is that we're so obsessed with the optics of success and fame and popularity. Like, the metrics are all about likability, and it's hard sometimes to not punish yourself when you look at those things and be like, what's wrong with me? Like, how come I don't have those numbers? Or how come I'm not at that level? Or how come I'm not making bread in 2020 like everybody else, And so I think for me, it felt important to tell a story that personally I'd never told before. Like, a lot of people who were in my life, oddly, in my 30s actually had no idea that I had aspired to be a musician, because that was my closeted secret, and not being queer, but being a pop star, wanting to be a pop star. And so for me, it just felt important to want to find a space to tell that particular story, but also push against this idea that, again, if you work hard and if you're talented and if you're, nominally attractive or whatever, all these things, that those things are enough to succeed. Because I think that there are a lot of people who, do work hard, who are nominally talented, who might in some worlds be attractive, and still don't succeed.
Well, you obviously work very hard and have succeeded in so many different ways. But as this show sort of suggests, do you still think about failure, with yourself? How do you define failure for yourself? I'm curious just if you want to get into that a little bit.
It's hard to say you're a failure when you have a show.
Yeah, I know.
But it's very specific. For me, one of the things that's so interesting about the show is the title, and how often when I tell people the title of the show or the play even, people would be like, but you've done this and this, and they'd start listing out my CV to me. And again, I think that speaks in some ways to the ways in which we don't allow each other room to talk about our disappointments. Because I think that's really what's at the core of failure, is talking about disappointment. I'm disappointed that this didn't work out for me. And so I think for me, when I think about failure, it's very specific to this particular dream, and it's very much tied to that feeling of I wanted, and I'm disappointed that it didn't work out.
And this dream is so elegantly portrayed in the show, not just by you, but by two other actors playing you. I'm just curious, what it was like working with two people who are playing you while you were also kind of playing you. What were your conversations like?
I've gotten really used to referring to myself in third person now. It's like if you look at the actual scripts, there's dream Vivek, adult Vivek, teenage Vivek, and in conversation. One of the things I actually found really beautiful about the show was also navigating pronouns, because when, we talk about childhood Vivek or adult Vivek, we use he, him pronouns. When we talk about dream Vivek or present day Vivek, we use she, her pronouns. And I was so nervous about how, especially in this particular climate we're in, I was nervous about how this would be navigated, but so I would feel I would say 99% of the time in conversations with producers or whoever, with the director, not that hard, people. But to answer your question, it was very strange to have people play me. Casting was very strange, because it's you write these words and then you watch people act you, and it's very weird to be I want, even making that decision, I'd like this person to play me. It's all very surreal and strange.
Did they come to you asking advice as to how to sort of get to the heart of you?
With Young, the actor who played me, the young me, Chris De Silva, who's so talented, I was actually so nervous because I wasn't sure if it had been explained to him and his family who he was playing, like, because I wasn't, like, you know, you get a script, but how much material are you getting? Are you getting this? Like, do you know where the story is going? And so on the first few days on set, like, I actually, like, deliberately avoided Chris, and now I feel so bad about it because actually his mom was on set with him the whole time, and she was so lovely. Like, anytime she saw me, she'd be like, "You look so beautiful, let's take a picture." But the first few days I was terrified because I was like, we have a limited amount of time. Like, I don't want to lose this actor because they changed their mind. So that's on me, I guess. But with Adrian, who plays like adult Vivek, we did have some conversations. And I think one of the things that I started doing a lot, and not just with cast, but also with crew, is to tell people to make the story their own. You know, like, I was so lucky I got to perform this play that it's based on like almost 40 times. So like, I know what that story is. I know what it's like for me to tell the story, but the gift of having other people tell your story is giving them the room to do that. And I got this really wonderful note from Adrian after filming saying that that was actually one of the most useful pieces of advice and guidance that I could have given them, is to actually tell them to make the character their own. So yeah.
And the music in the show is very familiar for anyone who grew up in the 90s. There's Alanis, CC Peniston, and a lot of songs by you as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a bit about sort of the music in the series and what went into sort of building that and those choices?
I mean, a lot of it was informed by budget, which is not a sexy answer. But yeah, like, I think in the play version, what's nice is like we're not as limited around those kinds of things. So, you know, when you see the play, it's sort of like a time capsule of pop music from like late 90s into like mid 2000s, and we play like quick snippets of different songs, and I really wanted to carry that over into the show. I wanted the show, as we're watching Vivek, I'm doing it again.
No, it's fair.
As we're watching Vivek go through the journey of, you know, trying to pursue his dreams, I wanted the viewer to also feel that nostalgia of like the late 90s into the 2000s, and so we had to sort of like, with the limited resources we had to think, you know, about what songs would resonate. And it was interesting when Finally showed up by CC Peniston as an option. We were like,
yeah,
yes, like, everyone knows Finally. And it's like, you know, we call it the hero song in the show, but it, like, because the idea is that Vivek hears this one particular song, and that's the thing that catapults his dreams, right? So we needed a song that felt big in a particular way. So, and then Alanis is like actually based on reality. So, you know, I remember doing these talent competitions in malls, and, you know, all the white girls were doing Alana Miles or Mariah Carey's Hero, and I always wanted to be a little different. I wanted to be a little like edgy or whatever, alternative. And so like I picked the ballad off Jagged Little Pill. So I was like really like, I was like, let's do that, you know? So it was nice that that actually worked out. We got to do Mary Jane in the show.
And you got Alana Miles too.
And we got Alana Miles, yeah. It helps when they're Canadian. I didn't know that she was Canadian.
So as I have suggested, you are incredibly prolific. I'm not going to name off your CV because it seems that
I'm good.
I follow you, and it's truly remarkable to me how much you do get done, whether it's, you know, writing books or going on tours or making albums. I'm curious for anyone who, you know, is trying to maybe somewhat emulate your ambition. How do you not get burnt out? Like, what keeps you going and motivated?
I think that one of the ways that I have dealt with trauma, and specifically homophobia, from growing up, has been art. I think that, you know, in a world that has told me that I don't belong, that I shouldn't exist, the way that I have resisted, the way that I have shown up, is by being creative, by actually making life through art. And so, you know, people will often say, you're always doing so much, like, when do you sleep? But it's like, this is the reason why I wake up in the morning. Like, getting to have these kinds of conversations, getting to make art, getting to make music, whatever it is, those are the things that, like, that's my fuel, that's my energy. And so, do I get burnt out? Yeah, like, for sure. There are definitely aspects of my job that I find harder than others. Maybe that's a separate conversation, but, you know, like, I think one of the hardest things too about being in my 40s and being like a queer brown artist is that, you know, there's this idea of a glass ceiling, right? Like, you people talk about like pushing it or whatever, but I feel like my experience is like they never let you in the house. You know, it's like you get in, you get your little toe in, and then you have to be re-invited, and you have to prove yourself again, and you have to prove yourself again. Like I never feel like I get to stay, and so that stuff feels really, really hard. But the art itself is actually so generative and so rewarding. And you know, even making the show the last day, I like ugly cried on set, and I literally said this was one of the happiest days of my life, like, or happiest times of my life. So I really, really, I'm just repeating myself now, but I just really like being creative and making art.
So much of being an artist, unfortunately, is about failure. I just wonder what you think we can learn from stories of failure, in addition to sort of stories of success.
I mean, I think one of the big things is that it doesn't have to be a dirty word. It doesn't, like, I love when people post on Twitter, you know, like just sharing today that I didn't get my grant application, or it, like, didn't get this or didn't get that. Because I think, again, I don't know about you, but like, I feel like I follow so many creatives, and some days it feels really hard because it feels like everybody's doing amazing things all the time. And you don't see the backside. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what people are going through. You don't know how hard they've worked to get through those things. And I think we need to demystify the work and the journey. And the work and the journey is actually, I think, with more failure than it is success. For any artist, I think there's way, way more failure stories than success stories. You know, like for me, I'm like, let's talk about our failures as a way to also not create a culture where, you know, everything feels impossible, and also the culture of comparison. Because I think that's the other thing, is like constantly talking about success, I think makes everyone feel bad.
Yeah.
And I know I'm part of that world too, right? Like, you know, every time I post something, like inevitably somebody's like, when do you sleep? And, you know, I know where that's coming from. And so, yeah.
So as you sort of look back on this time of your life while you're making the show and now that it's getting out there, you do at one point say that you want more than anything to be the brown Madonna. Would you take back all of the incredible accomplishments you've had not becoming a pop star to be the brown Madonna?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I didn't even have to think about it. Okay. Yeah, no, there's actually a line in the play at the end where I say, you know, and I would trade any accolade or achievement just to be seen as a pop star or even a one-hit wonder. And again, it sounds so ungrateful. Like I feel so lucky to be a working artist. You know, I've been making art for, you know, 20-something years. And I feel very, very lucky, but it's a weird like thing to see yourself as a thing that nobody else sees you. You know, like if people are familiar with me, if I have that privilege, people will be like, I love your book, you know, or whatever, which is really nice. But in my mind, I'm like, but I'm a singer, like I'm a musician, that's what I am. And so I think there is a part of me that, you know, as much as I'm really grateful for all the other things I get to do, in the multiverse, it's nice to imagine me as someone who's actually seen for what I actually see myself as, which is a singer.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't read ungrateful to me. It reads honest, which I feel like this show really is. And you're just sort of saying, I think, what a lot of people feel, but don't say because they want to sort of present in a certain way. Totally,
and I think that's the narrative around failure, right? Is like we actually are not allowed to sit in failure. We have to jump to resilience. We have to be like, okay, but I'll look at all these other things, or I still get to do this, or I still get to do that, and blah, 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 and we're constantly couching. And I think the beauty of the show is to actually take a moment and say, I mean, two things. That we get to say, A, I failed at something, but B, I think the thing that feels so core to the show is that it was still worth trying. You know, like, I think one of the things that surprises me over and over again as I've worked on the many eras of this show or the many chapters of this story is I think it was always audacious for a brown queer kid from Edmonton to believe in this dream. And at the same time, I'm so glad he did. Like, I'm so glad he went for it. I'm so glad, like, you know, even if it didn't work out, I still think it's better that you try. And I think it's better to live a life of trying. And I think that's what's at the core of the show.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that audiences are going to get to experience this story and your voice with this show. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I hope everybody watches the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It was my pleasure. Okay, 3, 2,